if you'd like to see this. So welcome all. I'm Jason. As I said, I would like to see if I can get my presentations to go forward. Hi, I'm Jason. I'm excited to share today's topic. AI and AIs and discussions in general seem to be dominating lots of different categories of conversation these days. I'm excited to share with you sort of what we've seen, what we've learned, share some research-backed analysis on how to use AI effectively. And I'll kind of translate that as I best I can to the proposal world and what I've seen myself firsthand and what our customers are using. Just to tell you a bit about me, I'm a former experienced customer. I'm a longtime proposal person, a proposal writer, a consultant, a sales leader that was involved with complicated products and complicated proposals. And probably above all of that, I'm a technology kind of advocate. So that's what makes this such an awesome topic for me and even for my company, because it's absolutely what we do. We help proposal people with solving these kinds of challenges. So as I was kind of alluding to, let's talk about AI today. Let's talk about the idea about what it could be, the dream of AI, if you will, the reality of what AI does for us today, how it's used, its challenges, why those challenges are not our fault. I thought that was helpful for me to hear when I was reviewing this research for this presentation. But then I'll share with you some best case scenarios, some best use cases for AI, specifically in the proposal world. I'll show you how we at Expedience, how we embrace the same model, even when it's with or without AI. We have the same sort of philosophy, and that's why this topic really resonated with us when I found out, hey, that's what we do. Isn't that great? And then I'll have time at the end for questions and answers. I've got a little video in the middle of this, and I hope it comes out well. If it doesn't, then for sure in the video that I share afterwards, you can see this if it doesn't come out well. But let's with that just jump in. Oh, well, I guess before I jump in, that's why I left the slide in, because it reminds me to share with you this idea that as you have questions, feel free to use the Q&A pane at the bottom. You can share them anytime. I've got a moderator on this presentation as well, and he'll share answers. He'll answer questions as kind of timely as possible, or if possible. And then those that are kind of generally interesting, or maybe they feel like it's going to be of interest to others, we'll share at the end. That Q&A pane is that button at the bottom of the Zoom window. It says Q&A. Just click that. As I mentioned, I've got this, the webinar will be recorded, and I'll share that with you automatically tomorrow. And last note there is, I'm happy to have deeper dive conversations separately. So if this starts an idea or discussion, or you want to dig in deeper to our software or what have you, please feel absolutely free to reach out to me, and I'll share my contact details again. So if you know proposals, you know the dream. I talked about the dream of AI. The dream is I get some RFP, AI looks at a bunch of old proposals, and voila, we've got a winning, beautiful, completed proposal out of the box. And we just sat back and sipped coffee, and all was wonderful. But and despite the fact that AI is amazing and can do lots of things, it might feel like this. Why should this be a dream? Why isn't this reality? It certainly can do what I described. You can absolutely have an RFP, and AI can absolutely, whether it's Copilot or ChatGPT or Gemini or the handful of other awesome tools that are out there right now, they all can produce a volume of really wonderful content based on other content we've created before. So why is it just a dream? Well, it's a dream because there's an accuracy problem here, right? The winning proposal has to be accurate. It has to be compliant. It has to be defensible. It has to accept our signature at the end of the day, our company's signature at the end of the day, that we are now we're authorizing this as our offer of business, right? There's a certain level of accountability that comes in that creates a challenge, because we all know AI tells itself, hey, by the way, we get things wrong. I just grabbed this. I was working on this presentation. I can't even remember what website it was on. And the little virtual guy at the bottom talked to me and said, hey, I'm a virtual agent. I'm here to help, but don't forget, I can get things wrong. And so it tells us, AI itself tells us, hey, I get things wrong. And then it also says, hey, this is how you're going to be responsible. This is how you have to fix the problem. You need to verify the answers independently. So it puts all the onus on us. And that onus or that accountability is exactly the challenge, especially when the stakes are higher, when it's in a kind of a business to business offer of work. So it kind of creates the good citizen paradigm, right? That if we just work hard enough, if we just do a good enough job, if we really, really try to pay attention, that we'll get that perfect grade, or we'll win the game, so to speak. But science tells us something differently, and I want to share this video. This is it's only about a minute and a half long, and it's not brand new. You see, it's from 1999, but it does talk this exact topic. So let me just shut up for a second and play this. Okay, so I don't know how well that came across in my video here. It was pretty choppy and hard to follow. I hope it was better for you. You may have seen this before. It's certainly not brand new, but it's I showed it to my wife just last night to say, "Have you seen this?" She was my litmus test to find out if it was going to be boring to everyone, but she hadn't seen it, so I decided, okay, well maybe it's new to some. So the science tells us, the cognitive science tells us that there's something called normal blindness. As a matter of fact, this gentleman named Jeremy Wolf, who's a predominant visual attention researcher, he created this phrase, look but fail to see. It's this concept of super common errors when things are directly in front of us. And we look directly at them, but yet we fail to see them. And it's kind of this in this category called normal blindness. He called this normal blindness. And I even like that word normal blindness to say this is not something we've done wrong. But it is a real challenge. And there's a million examples in daily life we all can talk about, whether they're looking for our car keys 5 times in the same spot and not seeing them. Can't find the ketchup jar in the refrigerator, even though we've been in that refrigerator a dozen times looking for ketchup. There's horrible examples of traffic accidents. A lot of motorcycles when have to be very careful because people can look directly at them while they're looking for a car. They fail to see that motorcycle. Or I again in prep for this, I read and I wasn't familiar with this idea of medical imaging. This is a real problem in medical imaging where an X-ray technician might be looking for a fractured bone and fail to see, a really obvious tumor or some other really horrible condition that was directly in front of them. But they were looking for X, they didn't see Y. Or in some places, looking for things that are right in front of them but jumbled up. Proofreading is a classic example of this, with a canonical example of a glaring typo in front of us. It's the THE for the, but it's HTE. But our brains will fix that. The brain sees and predicts and it completes. So just like AI is doing those auto guesses on some massive scale, auto-completing on a massive scale, our brain's doing the exact same thing, right? We're auto-guessing ourselves. So when something doesn't exactly add up, we just make it add up in our brain, and we don't even capture that we did something to correct it inside our brain. There's another challenge here that I want to share, something that I've read a bit about called automation bias. And the idea is this, that we are inclined to overtrust things that are completed, things that are done. Surely they would have caught all of the mistakes, so they would have never released the software, right? We don't have to test it, right? But that exact same overtrust bias is brought to really anything that's produced for us. And the more that's produced and the more done that thing looks, the more that automation bias sort of takes over. And we again going back to that idea that that good citizen paradigm problem, just the explanation of the problem. Hey, by the way, this is a problem. Know that it exists. Doesn't This is research backed, doesn't change the fact that when we sit down in front of that document and it's done, we have this bias that we take to it to say it's done and it's due and I'm over it. I want this thing out of my way. So that's the challenge that we're talking about. And AI kind of exacerbates the problem because it creates so much great content that it's really hard to spot what it gets wrong. So again, the more polished, the more finished looking that the draft is or the content is, it triggers this looks done mode. And what research has proven is that passive scanning, or even I'm attempting to actively scan. I hate that word passive here, as if we're not trying hard. We're actively committing brain cycles and time, and we're reading it, but it's not verification, and errors become very, very difficult to detect. So, just worthy of a pause. This is kind of stepping away from just AI in general, thinking about the problem we're trying to solve here with having efficient means of creating winning proposals. The biggest challenge often isn't lack of content. AI can find that content and build us this document, but the biggest challenge that customers that I've talked to for years and years, or back 10 years ago when I bought Expedience, the software, the challenge I was having wasn't just, oh, I can't find the thing I've written before. But my problem was when I was assembling that content manually and copying and pasting from old proposals to build that next proposal, I created mismatches that I didn't always catch. Things like the wrong customer's name. Believe it or not, I did that. Of course, maybe a lot of us have, but I certainly have. Or outdated claims. I've got old assumptions, old statements of fact. They were fact yesterday, but they're inaccurate today. Or I would use the client's industry kind of conversationally within my content to say, because you're an XYZ industry, this is how we'll approach your blah blah blah. And I would say, industry one over here and industry two over there, compliance gaps or missed requirements. These are why we're losing business and proposals. So AI is producing a bunch of content for us, a lot of it great, some of it problematic, and it is probably solving a problem that we're not necessarily suffering from as much, finding content, but it's creating as many challenges sometimes as it's solving. So how should we use AI? And I'll show you some use cases here, but the first recommendation would be this. I would use AI sparingly. So if I have trusted content, and I'll show you that's our approach here at Expedience, is by heavily leveraging trusted content first and foremost. This is content that you can rely on as not being inaccurate, right? And then when we use AI, we use AI intentionally, and we incorporate as many speed bumps to improve review. And I'll talk a lot about speed bumps here in the next slide or two. And then use AI to highlight errors and omissions. You can actually incorporate into your prompts that you're leveraging for AI to have AI tell us where it's making those suggestions or taking those logic leaps and have a real probability of having some challenges. The research shows, again, talking about the MIT Sloan review down below that I'm citing, research shows that it does not expand the time investment significantly as much as it does absolutely improve the accuracy. This idea of speed bumps and intentional AI use. I'll talk more about that here in a second. So what are speed bumps? Speed bumps are designed stops in the process. It requires approval before continuation. These are micro decisions that keep us in the game before it's in the document. So the users are evaluating AI suggestions before the insertion into the document, and it allows the author, the writer of that proposal, to remain accountable. So it gives the right friction at the right moment, and it prevents this sort of rubber stamping, if you will, of content. Just okay, it must be right. That bias that I was talking about earlier regarding what automation did must be right. That's sort of that bias we all bring. So going back to the idea I said before, we've all had this dream. So this is that suboptimal use level is basically having an RFP, and AI does some great stuff for us, and it generates volumes of content. And that volumes of content goes into a proposal that might be a little fractured or flawed, and we're gonna catch them. That's the model that in essence AI tells us to do. It'll, hey, give us the whole request. We'll build you the whole document. You figure out what's broken and fix it at the end. The more optimal use is this model, where the RFP the RFP could be just question. Question is asked, or full document of questions or what have you is asked. AI again searches old content, produces instead of volumes of content, AI produces suggestions or articles or elements or answers to specific questions. The more granular that is at this point, the better, because the more likely we are to catch that error right here as it's one piece. I examine it intentionally before I submit it to my document. Right. This is the idea of that intentional, that design speed bump of before that insertion of the document happened, we're validating, vetting, approving, fixing whatever was required to leverage that content. This is what we would call an optimal AI use case, an optimal AI use model. So let me sum up these recommendations as a general, and I'll show you more about, again, how we approach this as well. But our recommendations are these. That AI is used as a provider of recommendations, of ideas, as elements, answers, even components, text we can use, but not an autocomplete. And before those elements are committed into the document, they're previewed, they're reviewed, they're considered prior to commit. There's something really fundamental about that idea of preview before commit, because this is how we protect against that automation bias I was describing. We can accept this automation as a recommendation, and then accept the recommendation, the document, once it's been vetted and approved. Targeted friction at risk points. So the riskier the content is, we have AI help us identify points of concern, points of risk, and we use those to help guide further investigation. And then those are those verification prompts I was describing. So that's exactly how we've approached it here at Expedience. I want to show you both Expedience, and then I'll show you kind of AI and how these two things work together. But our approach is this. We start by saying don't lean on AI for everything. We start with a library of curated, trusted content. These are those legalese statements that the legal team has already signed off on. These are our methodologies, our processes, our systems, our descriptions that have been, again, vetted and approved. These have been, again, carefully reviewed, and we now have a library of those trusted elements. The system should recommend, when I'm searching for content, it should recommend the series of top matches, not just here's the best piece of content we know better than you do. You'd be amazed at how many, even before the day of the current days of Gen AI, how many of our direct competitors have kind of AI-based systems that, again, sort of start with this idea that the AI knows best. And it says, listen, you ask the question, I'll give you the best answer. The one that you've used most frequently, or based on some other algorithm that we've determined, we're going to determine the best match and submit that answer into the document for you. Yeah. You can check it afterwards. That's absolutely fundamentally against the recommendations of our approach, and of those articles I was just sharing a moment ago, right? That the system should recommend all of the top matches, or at least the handful of the most relevant pieces of content that allows the user to stay in the middle. They preview, they select, they insert content with traceability and ownership. And then as AI is used to evolve or to create new content, that content can be reviewed and added directly back to the content library. And I'll share a little bit of that as well. But matter of fact, let me share that now. So with that, I'll flip back over here to Microsoft Word. So Expedience, for those of you that are less familiar with our software, we bring a series of proposal automation tools directly into Microsoft Word. And that's awesome for the people that it's awesome for, because, well, Word has Copilot and all of those Gen AI capabilities we were talking about, as well as translation and whatever grammar suggestion and all of the other things about Word that we're used to. But we just bring those proposal automation tools directly to a platform that we're familiar with. Our automation platform starts with the idea of establishing a content library, as I was mentioning, of trusted answers. So when I drop in this, give us my HR transformation piece, this just as an idea of a piece of content for this pretend company that might be a very relevant and reused piece of content. That's not AI generated. That is as we have written it, or as we've achieved it, whether that was some AI achieved part of this and we wrote another part of it, but this has all been vetted and approved. And even where there was an opportunity that this piece of content could be personalized with the client's name, in this example, it's given me a little placeholder, a little action item here that allows me to drop in a client's name into a trusted document. Now, this piece of content requires no review. This is absolutely trustworthy content, because again, it came from the content library. Now, I can directly here within Microsoft Word, I could certainly use Copilot to help me reimagine this content, right? Maybe I'm just saying auto rewrite for me for the sake of making the point, but certainly I could give it more direction to say, hey, rewrite this piece of content for the purpose of a new industry or a new audience or a new change in our business model, right? And that content that it created for us could absolutely be considered a step ahead, could be better. I might have re-envisioned a new use case of that same content. Maybe both exist going forward. I'll just say insert below for the sake of making a point. Now, the way I'm using client name long here in this use case, if I were doing this in real world, I would have fixed a client name along with an actual client name, and AI would have, or Copilot would have named the client instead of giving me this non-working placeholder. But that idea of using content from a content library and then leveraging AI to make suggested targeted improvements is a really effective sort of combination of these two worlds. But certainly, I would get rid of the AI suggestion altogether. But certainly, the idea of a content library is the core of our approach. I'll show you that in the context of an RFP type example. So here's my pretend company's RFP that they've received. And here are a set of questions that I now need to find out what content do we have in our library that best supports or helps us answer this question. So I've been here at Experience now for gosh, over 8 years, I think, 9 years thereabouts. And I've had customers ask 100 times, like, why doesn't your tool just look at all the questions and give me the best answers? And it goes right back to that research I was sharing a moment ago that says the best case scenario is that we use the tool to search. We use the content library and the automation to say, this is the context of this question, our company's history, our vision, our culture. What are all of those approved assets, those trusted content library records that I could consider, right? And I could preview those records. This is that idea I was sharing again a moment ago that I validated before. It's not in my document. It's in a side pane that's just popped up and says, hey, Jason, this is that thing. That's this company history thing. Is that helpful? Is that the right answer? I could go, maybe even though this one, you'll see this weighting over here, the search engine's telling us how much these records are relevant to the topic that I've highlighted, company history, vision, and culture. Maybe this record that's 50%, obviously it touches on, who knows, history, but not vision, or culture, but not history, whatever it might be, right? And again, I could preview those. I could see, what is this piece of content? And I can even do this with this tool. I can even say, tell you what I want. I don't want one answer, one record. I want this piece of content, and I want that piece of content. So now what I've just done directly within my Word document of my RFP example, right? I know this isn't complicated. This is more like an RFI example. But here within this RFI, I've searched for a phrase. I found now trusted building blocks that I now can use to further establish my answer to this customer. Being in Word, obviously those things that we would all take for granted, I could do what I needed to further tailor this to the customer. Maybe I would type, I usually type just gibberish because no one likes to see me type real time. Maybe I'm saying, hey, we worked for you before, and this is what we know of you, and this is last year's proposal or last year's engagement. Don't forget that's how we worked for you. Maybe we might say. Again, being inside of Word gives us some advantages when it comes to flexibility and tailoring it and collaboration. So again, just to highlight the idea, I'm going to search this phrase of core values and guiding philosophies. Our tool says find the best fitting content first, preview them, ensure that's the content that we need. Reviewing this now with one chunk at a time, even though this is a trustworthy piece of content, there are multiple kind of overlapping. It wouldn't be that uncommon in a real world scenario that I might have 2 or 3 100% matches, right? So our tool would say leave the human in the middle. This is that intentional speed bump where they're previewing, they're making those active decisions. They're deciding that's the piece of content they want, and they're dropping it directly in to this document. It's just dropped in a reference for Jaguar Land Rover, is what it's somehow I've decided that's relevant to this topic. So that's the concept. I'll show you this one last use case is this. I can have using this is close to that very first example. Like, wouldn't it be great if I could just click a button and it made the whole document for us? This is our approach to that exact need. It's not so much an RFP, a questionnaire where the customer's asking us specific questions. This example is more like a statement of work or a sales proposal, proactive proposal, that not in response to an RFP, but more so, I've got a customer, they're asking us for services there in this area and offerings in that product line and services in this product line, right? And then as I'm making selections, these templates can guide a user to say, go get the things they need in order to complete this document. They even can have guidance like this, where the tool says, or the template doesn't allow me to choose multiple pricing model. It says I can choose this one, but if I choose that one, it unchooses the first, right? So that's the idea, that the templates can give us some real guidance. But when I say go, this is now this is different than I'm previewing each record individually. My intentional selection was at that automated template level, but it now can assemble all of those trusted building blocks to build out that client-facing document. I'll zoom out a little bit to kind of make the point of what this just did, right? But there's the cover page and the cover letter and the table of contents that it can automatically generate for me with my headers and footers. Really, everything I might need is that client-facing document with lots of those opportunities for. So going back to the example of industry, just because I saw the word industry and I remember sharing that 2 seconds ago, that I might frequently write content like this that says, hey, we understand blah, blah, blah. We work with XYZ industry, right? I might reference that industry in 5 or 12 different pieces of content that were brought in right now. When I, within this tool, say this is an energy natural resources client, and that's the industry that they're in, wherever, or let me use client name long is Coca-Cola, and I'll say the client name short is Coke. But I don't, that's not how I would say it, but that's just easy for me to type and you don't have to fight through too much pain, but in watching me do so. When I declare, in this case, the industry and the client's long name and the client's short name, throughout the document, wherever the client's long and short name are used, there's Coca-Cola and Coke and oh, was there industry there too as well? I think it was. Yeah, there it is. There's the industry right there. Even within that phrase, right, with that paragraph, I'm kind of naturally using. I'm kind of intentionally using, but meant to look as if I wrote this just for you. But there's a real opportunity, right? That I said energy, natural resources here, and then I called it down there a different thing, or in some of the piece of content that I copied and pasted in. So these, what we call placeholders, are our answer to ensure kind of completion of an accuracy of that content that we add to this document. So this is all around the idea of leveraging before AI using a trusted content library. This is now the jumping point by which we may very well decide, as we've now completed this document, that we need now to do something different. We need to add to this content. Maybe we've got a unique challenge by this customer that we need to incorporate into this document. That's where we would leverage the AI tool then to help us either iterate existing content. And I say the AI tool, I meant to say that kind of generically, because my example a moment ago was Copilot. And I said, hey, Copilot, do this for me quickly. And certainly, again, being within the office space and Copilot also being behind your firewall, there's some real advantages to using Copilot over using AI tools. Some of those advantages largely start and stop with the idea of safety, right? That this is behind your firewall. The content that your users or that you share with Copilot isn't shared outside of your four walls. It's all of the same kind of risk mitigation factors that are brought into your Microsoft Office environment are also here at play with Copilot as well. And that's why, again, and that's being inside of Word makes perfect sense that I would say, yeah, Copilot's here. But regardless as to what your kind of AI tool of choice might be, you may very well want to take this content that was generated from the content library and say, great, but I now have a new use. And again, that output from that new use could certainly be brought back into the content library. So I think that's probably where I'll draw the line for now as to what I can best share that would be hopefully helpful to everyone. I'm happy to answer any questions. And AJ, I think you're on right now. I know you may have had a few questions already. Maybe you can share any questions that have come in right now, and we can start there.
Yes, I had a handful of open questions that I wanted to kind of save for this general interest area. The first question was around how does Expedience help capture AI-generated content for addition to the content library?
Okay, it's a great one. That's right where I ended. I thought about continuing talking about that, so I'll just continue. It's great. So let's talk about that. Let me make Copilot go away for a second. Let's for the sake of oh let's do it like this. Let's grab this piece of content right here, just this one paragraph, and let's just presume for a second that I want to rethink that content. I want to evolve and iterate that content, and let's leverage Copilot to do some of that thinking, right? So I could say, Copilot, go. Let's just use this auto rewrite again. I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't just say, what do you think, Copilot? How might you word this differently? I would give it some specific instructions. I would, but here again, talk about the speed bumps. Great example of Copilot's speed bump, where Copilot's now offering for me multiple variations. It's got one of three. This is variation number one. It's saying, hey, Jason, here's a new rewrite that you might like better, might work better for you. There's variation two, variation three. So Copilot just didn't assume, hey, I know best, and I'm going to give you what I think is the best one. It left me in the middle, but let's just replace it. Let's say that rewrite right here, that's ideal. And I want that piece of content in my document. Well, isn't this a challenge, right? So Copilot is using the UK spelling of specialized and customized. So I'll go back to the US version. But that piece of content, if this were its own record and what have you, maybe I want to absolutely consider marking this content, whether I want to mark it simply for review, additional review cycles afterwards, or I want to mark this for addition to the content library. What Expedience can do is help me flag this content. I can flag this as brand new content or flag this as AI edited content in a way that I can say, great, this is something that needs a second set of eyes on it in order to have it complete. At the end of this document, I could run a report at the end of this proposal process, or the end of this kind of the review cycles have begun in this document. I could run a report to say, give me everything from this document that was flagged for review. And from that exact report, I can say, awesome, add those elements back to the content library. It's a little deeper to show you how that works. And again, if you'd like to dig into that, please reach out to me. I'm happy to walk you through and show you exactly how our tool helps that. But it starts with this concept of once I've iterated or added content, I can earmark that content as new or edited, and then I can report from this document to best leverage, capture that. Can you imagine the beautiful cycle here? Once we've gone through that cycle, we had AI help us iterate, evolve, create something brand new. We made something beautiful and a beautiful addition to our proposal language. Now I've vetted it, and once I've vetted it, I've proofread it. We've got multiple sets of eyes and what have you that have been laid on that content. I can add that to the library of trusted content. So the next time I need this record or this element within my executive summary in this example, I have more trusted Lego blocks to build that thing from. I hope that answers the question. Happy to dig in deeper. What's the next question, AJ?
Yeah, on that idea of trust. So earlier you were talking about normal blindness and the idea that our brains fill in what we expect to see. If we can't trust our own eyes to catch errors in a finished draft, what makes you confident that we could safely use AI at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for sure, there are real risks in using AI generated content. Reducing dependency is my first is my first recommendation, and not just my first recommendation. Maybe what the science would say, the fewer opportunities that we introduce, the fewer opportunities for errors to be introduced, the more likely I am to have an error-free document, right? More accurate that they'll become. Reducing dependency using content libraries is number one. Number two, intentional selection, that speed bump idea. Careful review as bite size as possible is recommended. But at the end of the day, you are absolutely intentionally making a trade-off of reducing control to increase extend your reach by using this tool of AI. Can I ensure that I'll never have an error? No. And if that risk is too great, I would say don't use AI. Use a tool like our tool proper is a content library driven automation of trusted records. Oh, by the way, it could what we could add to that library from AI once we've learned to trust it, once we've been able to trust its output. But trusted resources are optimal, but certainly there are some risks to be involved if you choose to use AI. Any other
On that
questions?
theme of utilizing AI, would having a human in the loop reduce AI's effectiveness? How do you balance speed during busy proposal seasons with the beneficial friction you mentioned earlier?
Well, this is interesting. That MIT Sloan article I was discussing earlier, and I've got all the links at the back of my presentation. If it's helpful, way back here when I share this, you'll see, oops, good night. I didn't know it was going to go away. That's how it works, I guess. That's wonderful. But I've got a handful of links I can share with you as to exactly these articles. But that MIT Sloan article that I'm describing here, oh goodness gracious, I'll just shift F5. Sorry about that, guys. Um, it would say that it's not slower. I think if I understood the question right, AJ, is
Mhm.
human in the loop, does it slow things down
Yeah.
and or does it make it less effective? And
Mhm. Mhm.
I would say no, not I would say that the MIT Sloan study would say that the speed bumps don't necessarily increase total task time. They just reallocate the time from passive skimming, which fails, to active deciding, which works. And at the end of the day, it's about being effective and not just fast. It was years ago, and I should have had I could have been in the slide deck because it fits this topic so well. But years ago, there was an article, I'm sorry, a commercial of lawnmowers, and and they were having these riding lawnmowers just blaze by, and they're saying, "How fast can you mow?" And whoever the right ones are say, "It's not how fast you mow, it's how well you mow fast." And that's the idea here. It doesn't necessarily slow you down. What it does is it allows you to again shift that time so that it improves the effectiveness while still maintaining a fast, efficient model. Any other questions that made sense to share, or that
Great. I can wait one more moment to see if anyone else wanted to type out any more questions.
silence is always my hardest part. I talk way too fast and have too many things to say, probably, but I'll just give some general thoughts, and AJ, you interrupt here if anything else pops up. But certainly a big topic, and I was trying to really focus our discussions, not to say that AI is the problem or don't ever use or anything of the sort, but the idea of a use case, a model by which you walk before you run in usage of, and that's not to say I'll get smarter today and then let it complete the whole document tomorrow, but that's the model that as we're engaging with these Gen AI tools that we do so very deliberately on chunks of content. Because if it's hard enough to find a word that's misspelled in a single paragraph, you can only imagine finding those words throughout a 100-page document that was auto-ginned up and it looks wonderful. Matter of fact, as I read it, I read a lot of words I've written before, makes me trust it even more as I'm reading through, like, good, it's done. but there's certainly some risks there. So I hope this is any
Great.
other
I,
questions, AJ?
yes, just had
Oh,
another
go ahead.
question come in.
Um,
How can your solution help ensure AI generated content is well reviewed prior to submission? Does it give a scorecard of percentage generated by AI and percentage generated by humans?
awesome. No,
Mhm.
we don't. Can Copilot? Yes. Can we help that process? Yes. Let's talk about that a bit. And a matter of fact, if there's enough interest in this topic, I could do a presentation on just this idea. Consuming. A matter of fact, I don't know. Shut that down for me, please, AJ. That's a wonderful
Yes.
idea for a topic because I do think there's a real efficiency gained by being able to look at content generated and then bring it back into the content library. So elements of that question, and I said no too briefly. Let me get into that a little bit further. So does our software say, hey, there's that Word document, and you had content library record, something different, another content library? Does our software keep track of the document and tell you what you did from our library of trusted content versus what you wrote versus what AI wrote? The challenge is this. So the beauty of it and the challenge of it is it's Microsoft Word. And Microsoft Word could certainly have track changes. You can see what, as you're adding content, you can kind of keep track of where content came from in that way. And Word allows some level of granular tracking. But our software doesn't say, we don't have a button that says, tell me what AI wrote. But certainly we do have a series of reports that I could share in future webinars like this, or reach out to me directly if you'd like to have me. A matter of fact, I'll go just for the sake of having my contact information. That very first slide, one of them up there had my email address. But feel free to reach out to me directly if you would like to chat on this. That was the slide I was looking for. Chat on this sooner than later. But certainly, I think this would be great for a future webinar to show how we can earmark elements within a document to say AI generated or brand new or edited, and we could mark that accordingly within the document in a way that I can click a button at the end of the kind of as a part as a component of the review cycle. I can click a button and say report against this proposal and tell me what was generated by AI. Tell me what was earmarked for review, and have a succinct view. So it kind of goes, and if you think about it, back to that MIT research I was sharing earlier, the more we can kind of break the content away from the proposal into a report status, to say chunk of content one, chunk of content two, et cetera, three, four, five, whatever there may be, this now becomes more visibly disjoined from the proposal in a way that I might have an easier way to get away from that automation bias I was describing, where it looks less polished and complete. It's now just, hey, this is a specific element that we need to lay eyes on, and let's be careful and beware. But that's how Expedience does it. I can show you this to you in future webinars. So certainly, it's just a few reports off of a proposal that we can help kind of automate that process. Well, gosh, that's 45 after, and that's the time I usually allocate for these. Other questions, that's my email address. Feel free to email me directly, or if I didn't touch on the answer here well enough, or if you'd like to just chat about something in greater detail, please feel absolutely free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to chat again directly, and I hope this is of value and help to everyone. And with that, I will give you all back the 15 minutes that are still on the calendar for this event, and wish you all the best of days. Thank you. Talk soon.